42, is that right? 4:42. That's enough for a break. So let's come back to FCR 2020-21, paper number 5, Mr. Jeremy Tam. Or rather, I'm a lady. Yes, Miss Claudia Moore. I have a question about how you've been appointed. How do you feel? You're now going to chair the House Committee meeting. It's not related to this meeting. This is a political favor, apparently. Ms. Claudia Moore, if you want to discuss it, I can discuss it with you after the meeting. This is definitely not... Well, how about some candor? Just tell us. Just come clean with it. Right. We will discuss it when we have time. Let's move on with this item. If there are no other comments, I will put this paper to a vote about the creation of the post of Chief Land Surveyor under the Lands Department. Please ring the bell for 5 minutes.
你解42分就頭咁樣。係啊，譚茂議員。主席，嗱，其實
Yes, Mr. Jeremy Tam. Chairman, I'd like to make some comments and I do have some questions. How about I put the questions in writing and please forward the questions to the administration. I was looking for you just now. Well, I thought the meeting would be resumed at 4:45, but it resumed at 4:42. How peculiar. Usually it's either 4:30 or 4:45. Well, that's exactly 15 minutes.
提一提大家咧，我哋即將表決啦。
May I remind members that we are going to vote on 2 items, and we will proceed to the next one after we finish the first one, and then we will start the discussion on Ocean Park.
現在開始表決。
Voting begins. Voting is closed. The result is displayed. 32 for, 19 against, no abstention. This item is passed. Next, FCR 2020-21 number 5 about the creation of a supernumerary post of a government land surveyor. Do we need to ring the bell? Yes, I claim a division. So the bell will be rung for 5 minutes.
係啊，譚文豪議員。
主席，我少意見啫。嗱，因為咧
Mr. Jeremy Tam, just a comment. Well, if you take a break and if you want to resume a meeting, usually will be sent an SMS. We didn't receive one, so I just thought it would resume at 4:45 because you resumed at 4:42, which is a rather non-standard practice. Should you send an SMS to members? Any response from the clerk? Thank you, Chair. Usually, for a short break in an FC meeting, say for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, before the break, Chairman usually would state how long we should break for. So we don't usually send SMS for FC meetings. But if members agree there is a need to do so, we will send SMS in the future.
我哋停嗰。
Well, when we stopped, it may not be 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So if it's 13 minutes, then we'll just add 15 minutes to it. Well, it doesn't matter. If you want a more accurate time, then I'll ask this clerk to send you an SMS. Mr. Jeremy Tam? Yes, there is a need. Unless the chairman says that, well, later on we will resume the meeting at 4:45, then it's okay. If you say it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then I think you better send us an SMS telling us the exact time so we all know when the meeting will resume. Voting starts. Voting stops. Now we show the result. 40 in favor of the proposal, so it's approved. Now we move on to FCR 9. Members are invited to approve this item, that it's Head 152, a supplementary provision of 13.23 million under Head 152, Government Secretariat, to take forward a rethink exercise to chart the way forward for Ocean Park's rebirth. The new commitment of 5,425.64 million under Head 152 to provide non-recurrent to provide funding to the Ocean Park Corporation to support the operation of the Ocean Park for 1 year, to repay the commercial loans of the Ocean Park Corporation, and to settle the costs for completing Ocean Park's Taishan 1 development project. And an increase in the establishment ceiling in terms of notional annual midpoint salary value of Head 152, Government Secretariat, Commerce and Economic Development Bureau in 2020 to 21 from 214,856,000 to 218,554,000 for the creation of relevant non-directorate civil service posts required for undertaking the rethink exercise and following through in seeking the necessary approvals for the proposed formulated in the rethink exercise, and amending the terms under Loan Fund Head 274 Tourism Subhead 121 Loan for the Ocean Park Redevelopment Plans and Subhead 122 Loan for the Ocean Park's Taishan 1 Development Project, so that the repayments will commence in September 2021. We have here with us Mr. Edward Yao, Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, here with us and his team. And we would like to ask Mr. Chung to give us the report. Well, on the 20th of January, we had a meeting.
經濟發展委員會
We had a meeting and we discussed the repositioning of the Ocean Park. And we have also talked about the relevant financial arrangements. And it includes a funding proposal of $10.64 billion. Well, we all agree that the Ocean Park has made contribution to Hong Kong, but we have different views concerning the funding. We believe that the government has the responsibility to support the Ocean Park, but it should also explain how the funding would be used appropriately. Well, some members have reservation on the government's funding. Well, because they think that, well, in the future, visitors coming to Hong Kong may drop, and the development plan cannot assure that the Ocean Park can make money instead of losing money in the future. And also there are thematic parks in our neighboring places which may make the competition keener. So, and also the Taishan development plan is delayed. So the government's injection may fall into a bottomless pit. They hope that the government will think of other alternatives. For example, turning the Ocean Park into other uses. For example, making it an educational center, etc. So eventually, we passed a motion supporting the funding application, and we asked the government to give us a new financial arrangement proposal for us to consider. That is how the amount of money can be used properly and how can it be used efficiently. We have given the response. The government has given us a response, and it has been circulated to members via the relevant papers. Now I would read out the members' names: Jeremy Tam, Regina Yip, Hui Chi-feng, Kwang Chun-yu, Hui Chi-wei, Pun Xiu-ping, Wu Chi-wei, Su-yung, Kenneth Lau, Yung Hoi-yan, and Claudia Mo. First, Ms. Lo Wai-kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Ocean Park, it needs to be salvaged, and it needs $4.5 billion. There have been a lot of discussions and debates about this in the community, and some of my friends from the commercial sector texted me. They asked me, what can we do? It seems that we cannot refrain from saving the ocean park, but this is a bottomless pit. Why don't we just clear the land and build residential buildings on it? But the ocean park has been doing a lot, and also there is a celebrity which loves animals and attaches importance to conservation because he thinks that the ocean park must be saved because it plays a very important role in education and conservation. Now, over the past 40 years, the ocean park has become an iconic place in Hong Kong. It's a very special place. It's not only the collective memory of Hong Kong people, but is also part of our lives. I remember a friend said to me, he's very happy. He said that now I can take my grandchildren to the ocean park, and both my grandchild and I can enjoy free entry. This is really very happy. But of course, when he enters the ocean park, he will have to spend some money. So this is really a dilemma. But the ocean park, we don't just look at the economic benefits. It's not just a business. Well, balancing the books is very important. However, it has made a lot of contribution to the tourism industry. Over the past decades, Hong Kong people loved to go to the ocean park, and overseas visitors, including those from other countries on the mainland, would love to visit the ocean park. So it has made a lot of contribution to Hong Kong's tourism industry. And also in terms of conservation and education, it has also done a very important job. For Victoria Park, it doesn't make money, so why don't we close the Victoria Park? I think a lot of people will fight for the Victoria Park. So I think we should look at this issue from different perspectives, not just the economic angle. But my friend has asked me these questions: when can we fill up this bottomless pit? I hope the government can give me an answer. So in the short term, medium term, and long term, what are the visions? Now, if we are salvaging the ocean park this time around, then what will happen to the ocean park in the short term, medium term, and long term? Ocean park did have its prime time. It did make money, but of course now globally, tourism industry is in the doldrums. So now I'll give my time to the secretary to answer. Thank you, Mr. Low. Well, from the government's perspective or my perspective, I agree with what Mr. Low said. The ocean park is a very important asset of Hong Kong, and it has been serving Hong Kong people very well. Now, it's a statutory body. It's not profit-making, so it's not like other commercial entity. Now, in good times, it makes money, but it would plow back the money into the development of the park. No shareholders will pocket the money. So the ocean park has set a very good example. It has repaid society. Each year, 640,000 Hong Kong people can enjoy concessionary or sponsored admission to the ocean park. Well, they are elderly, or maybe they are from the vulnerable groups. And also, it has been doing a lot in education and conservation of marine animals. So it has given our children a nature classroom. So other than having fun there, children can also learn at the ocean park. But over the years, it has been operating on a self-sufficient basis. It has its successful days, but it has also encountered problems. And over the past 2 years, it has met with a lot of adversity, and in the past 3 months, it has suspended its service. Mr. Holden Chow, thank you, Chairman. Well, for the Ocean Park, earlier on, the government had a proposal of $10.6 billion. It's too much. And now you have scaled it down, but you have to answer my questions. Well, emotionally, I think Hong Kong people would like to save the collective memory and the animals. However, rationally, public money should not be thrown into this bottomless pit. So, Secretary, can you tell us clearly? Well, you will be repositioning the Ocean Park. It shouldn't be a large-scale theme park. It's like burning money. It's a dead end. So the Ocean Park should not be positioned as a large-scale theme park anymore. So what should it do? Conservation and education. Only by doing so can you cut costs. Now, if you adopt the old approach, you will continue to burn money and you will be squandering public money. I really have to point it out. So, governments, how are you going to reposition the Ocean Park? And secondly, now the Ocean Park is restricted by the Ocean Park Corporation Ordinance. So it can only ask the government for money to survive. Now, if the government is to reform the Ocean Park, will you tell us that you will be amending the relevant ordinance so that new income sources can be created and there can be other investors, so that in the future it won't just ask the government for money. It can also have other sources of financing, and it won't waste public money. This is my second question. Third question, can the government explain to us, in case the Ocean Park is to close down, how much the government would have to pay? I hope the government will answer these questions first. I want to know what the actual situation is, because this is something very grave. For Mr. Chow's question, when I came here on the 20th of January, as the chairman said just now, yes, we've listened to members' views. So that's why we are submitting this proposal. So in terms of the monetary amounts, there are changes, and also the conditions have changed. Well, there is something that we can foresee. Well, we have listened to members' views. So for the original proposal, you didn't have much confidence in that. You don't think the Ocean Park can cope with the future changes. That's why we are making these changes. As Mr. Holden Chow said, in terms of operation and income and expenses and its repositioning, we are now working for all of this, and we've been listening to different views. But there was something that couldn't be foreseen at that time. That was on the 20th of January when we submitted the plan. 6 days later, that is on the second day of the Lunar New Year, because of the epidemic, the Ocean Park suspended its service. And now it's almost 3 to 4 months, and there's no income during this month. So that's why we need this money to tie the Ocean Park over. But we've been listening to your views. Well, in terms of positioning, in the past year or so, we've been looking at that. Well, the Ocean Park has its innate advantages. For example, in terms of education and conservation, the Ocean Park has done a good job, and the government and the public also saw that. There was some amusement rides, so in the long run, this may not be the advantages of the park. In the coming 1 or 2 years, with the impact of the epidemic, our inbound tourist number may drop. So all this will be taken into account when we think about the future of the ocean park. And when it comes to operation, yes, the present law doesn't allow the ocean park to raise funds. So maybe we should make some amendments to the law so that there are other ways to help the ocean park financially.
下一位呢就係
Next, Dr. Chang Chong Chai, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'll just make it short. Here's my position. I don't mind Ocean Park going bust or going bankrupt, but I do take issue with one thing. If the park goes bust and it gets acquired by a mainland capital and it turns into another amusement park like those you find in mainland China, that's something that will bother me. So here are my questions. First, back in late January, the Bureau said that there would be a repositioning strategy for the Ocean Park. At that time, it was said that the Ocean Park had only around $400 million in operating liquidity, and then you have a huge amount of debt. So has there been any changes to these figures? I'll defer to Permanent Secretary. Commissioner for Tourism. The current money, the funds it has, it will dry up in June this year. That's when the park will become insolvent. And what about the debt? Chair, as stated in the paper, there are commercial loans outstanding. They are currently being paid off. By June, if there is no more payment, as stated, there will be around $3 billion in commercial loans for debt. There will also be debt on the government side, owed to the government. So for the debt owed to the government, what will be the amount? Is there a period within which the debt have to be paid off? Chair, it stated in the paper that there will be around $5.3 billion owed by the park to the government. As stated in the paper, there's recommendation that the payment date should be pushed so that it starts in September next year. So now the park is asking the Finance Committee for $5.4 billion. We now see the bank has $3 billion in commercial debt. If the park goes on for the next 6 months, they will have a certain amount of money for operating expenses. But we don't know what's the amount of money coming in if it goes on. So we're assuming. But my question is, the $2 billion for operating fund, is it good for a full year's operation? Or is it like most of the $5.4 billion fund will be used to repay debt? So that's a question for our funding for you. Is the money that we approve, if we approve it, mainly for repaying loans, or do you have enough money from this funding for the bank for the park to find its way out? Is it for paying debt? Chair, we'll come to the Finance Committee for the funding for two purposes. First, we have to pay off the commercial loans. Otherwise, there will be a series of situations we have to deal with. And secondly, we're asking the Finance Committee for the funding so that the park can go on for the next 12 months. But the point is, we want to, for the short term, we want to avoid the situation where the park has to cease operation in the short because of liquidity problem within the short term. And we want to see the ocean park reopening. And we pledged that within 6 months we can find a way out regarding the repositioning of the ocean park. It's different from the strategic repositioning plan we proposed last time. Chairman, a quick follow-up question. In the worst case scenario, if we do not approve the funding and the ocean park goes into liquidation, for the animals in the ocean park, what do we do about them? Say the giant pandas, do we just send them back to mainland China? The worst case scenario, are you prepared for this, or do you have absolutely no preparation for this? A question put to Ocean Park. Maybe I just address this point. We have more than 7,000 animals, more than 4,000 species, some of them species. If the park closes down, then there was no way for us to safeguard the well-being of these animals. So we have to look for a suitable sanctuary for these animals. It's a huge issue, especially given the epidemic going on. We need places that are quality places and capable of taking care of these animals, and the process also takes time. It would be a shame if Hong Kong loses these animals. These are animal ambassadors for our conservation. Next, Dr. Pierre Chen. I don't really want to see Hong Kong rewarding mismanagement. As you can see, if we do not salvage Ocean Park at this point, then it would be a shame. It's really a dilemma. If we see an organization doing a poor job in terms of management, and I just don't want to see we just let them keep doing this. They have to fix a problem. From what I can see the rise and fall of the Ocean Park. When I was a kid, I came from an impoverished background. I couldn't afford to go to the Ocean Park. I graduated in the year 2000. The Ocean Park used to be a dilapidated place, but then when I went in, it was different. I have been a long-time visitor of the Ocean Park. I paid for the admission. I took my entire family on a special admission. So you can see I'm a big fan of the Ocean Park. But at one point I became fed up with the park. The entrance on Chosen Hill, you couldn't reach Brick Hill because it was so crowded that you couldn't take the cable car. The lawn was excessively long. I just gave up on that special ticket. I agree with you on the point about education and conservation. From experience, I can tell you. Well, here's the reason I choose the Ocean Park over Disney. I take my children to the Ocean Park. I think it's meaningful as an experience when I teach my kids about animals in the Ocean Park. On education and science, knowledge in science, I impart this knowledge to my kids, but I don't see a lot of that in the Ocean Park. For parents, I want to see education, conservation going on, but I think the Ocean Park has been inadequate in this regard. My first question, it's a problem that has been there for a long time. Over the past several years, you can see there are operational issues with the Ocean Park. For the management of the park, are there going to be changes made to address the loss? What changes will you bring in at the management level for the coming year? What will be done? First of all, Chair, I want to thank Dr. Chen for sharing his experience. I believe many people in Hong Kong are just like you. They love this park. Management, operation, these things certainly matter in an organization. Improvements will need to be made. For the Ocean Park, we see some of the problems stem from changes in the market. And there will also be things that need to be changed in the long term. So that's why when we came here to Electrical in January, we said that when we were drawing up the strategy, there would be changes. You brought up some figures. I just want to give you the backdrop or a bit of the context. The figures about the Ocean Park I need to give you more information. So we're not going to get hung up over the figures. So I know we're crunched for time. First question, at the management level, the management has to explain to the public and the government what changes will you make. A year from now, let's say, suppose we give you the funding for a year, and you may come back a year from now telling us the same story. It would be a shame if we ditched it, if we give up on animals and we drop losses. I fear that you will just come back next year, tell us the same story, asking for money with the same reasons. You're saying at this moment that this is a one-off funding for the Ocean Park. What if it turns into a recurrent funding required by the park? It's not like the Ocean Park will turn to a profitable organization a year from now. First, there's something I don't want to see, and that is I don't want to see the park go bust. The second, I don't want to see the Ocean Park regularly coming to the Legislative Council asking for funding. We see in its 43-year history, the Ocean Park didn't come here for funding. You don't see the park asking for funding every now and then. Maybe there has to be changes made to the financing model, self-financing model, or maybe something has to be done about the positioning of the Ocean Park. If I get a chance, I will explain more in later. Jeremy Tam, 5 minutes. Do you know what it means by borrow only when you're sure you can repay? The park owes the government more than $5 billion, and then there's more than $3 billion in debt owed to outside organizations. So now you have more than $8 billion in debt. What has the park been doing over the past several years? It used to be profitable. Now, operating at a loss, threatened with imminent liquidation next month, isn't the management supposed to be held accountable? The chairman of the board, the chief executive officer. I know you guys are retiring next month in July. You guys are retiring, but the park isn't retiring. You came to us for funding at this juncture. Several years ago, some years ago, for the Taishuan Water World, you were saying this would be completed in 2017, and up to this year, it's not completed yet, and you don't even know how much more money you need to complete them. Paragraph 22 in the papers said that you would spend the money, fund the outstanding costs for the completion of the Taishuan project. And it's only after rebirth works out, and then you can have the Taishuan project. What happens if it doesn't work out? You just keep doing this again and again. How many projects like these do you have? The Taishuan project for the water world. Are you thinking that there's a chance that you may not be able to open the Taishuan project? Does it mean that after the review, there's a chance that you may decide not to open the Taishuan water world? Or are you going to convert it into something entirely different? Why are you not opening the water world? There's no reason for not opening it. If you're saying you need new facilities at the Ocean Park, new tourist attractions, you asked us for a huge amount of money years back then, and now you have facilities that are supposed to be open soon. The government is supposed to help the bank, to help the Ocean Park open its facilities. There were projections about visitors in the past. Are you saying that you're not confident about the forecasts about the number of visitors every year? You said that there have been efforts to conduct for education. This one called something about whiskers and his friends. I'm glad that you put them in kindergartens. You didn't put them in a police station. Otherwise, they overreact. I think this is nice. The material here is nice. Your colleagues have done a great job. But then I found out from my wife, from my kids. My kids are at K3. They have never seen this booklet. This materials over here. Hey, could you check with the other parents and mothers? To check with other kindergartens, the parents. Only a very few of them have come across the booklets, the materials you produced. I can see your colleagues at Ocean Park have put in a lot of work. They've done a good job. I try to read the materials to my kids. They were happy to listen to it. The material actually works, but the promotion is seriously flawed. You hand over the materials to the kindergartens, but somehow even the kindergarten teachers have never heard of this. There must be something seriously wrong. My question for you, first, why don't you just open the Taishuwan Water World? And second, these products, these are very helpful, of great educational value. You guys are not Disney. You don't have their same advantage. You don't have the same TV exposure like Disney. If you could showcase these whiskers, these images, why have you done such a poor job in publicity and advertising? I'll defer to the CEO of the Ocean Park about education, Mr. Matthias Lee. I want to thank Mr. Tam for his comment. We attach importance to conservation and education. We reached out to kindergartens in Hong Kong, and 200 odd schools applied for that booklet. And the larger book was handed out to teachers so that they could show students and tell them stories. And for the booklet, Chairman, he's wasting my time. But these materials have not reached the students. There must be some problems in the process, and also the point about the water world. Chair, briefly for me, the water world, we hope that we can provide funding so to complete this project about the water world. The target is to complete the works within 2020. And since there's also the repositioning, if I pledge to open or not open the water world, then that will restrict what we can do in the future. And as to the third question raised by Jeremy Tam, a clarification for me. The Ocean Park is not a publisher of educational materials. The park reaches out to schools. It provides. I know that more than a million children have taken part in STEM education activities within the park. Mrs. Regina Ip, Chair. Last time the government came to us, asked for $10.6 billion, sent us a lady introducing the tourist attractions, assuming that the tourist attractions could draw 7 million people. The complete lack of a business plan was infuriating. There are so many business elites on your board, but none of them walked us through stuff like balancing the books, competitors in the field, financial problems. So last time when Ocean Park came here for the funding, we should criticize them. This time there is significant improvement. They're asking for a smaller sum of money. The government has acknowledged that the operation, the resources have to be scaled down for the Ocean Park. If you focus on amusement rides, the Ocean Park is no match for the other competitors like the Chimelong Ocean Kingdom. These are high-cost operations. You're saying that now you want us to give you the money to pay off the loans and to also put the Ocean Park on life support, to buy time and work out a way to handle the $5+ billion owed to the government. I think the direction is right. The question for the Secretary, what's your view on the way ahead for the ocean park? The amusement rides really shouldn't be here. The people in Hong Kong don't really want that many mainland visitors here. People here don't feel like this is a park for Hong Kong people. And the second question, the two hotels, is the revenue from two hotels going to help the ocean park? Third, about the animals in the ocean park. How are the giant pandas doing? About the mating of the pandas? Chair, I will address the...
同意啊，葉劉淑。
I'll answer the first three questions. I'll defer to my colleagues to answer the rest. And I agree with Mrs. Regina Ip. In the past few years, because of the situation and unforeseen circumstances such as the epidemic, we have changed our line of thinking. Of course, we should focus on the innate advantages of Ocean Park. In fact, some 40% of visitors to Ocean Park are locals, and many of them are Gold Pass holders or other annual pass holders. Also, be it visitors locally or otherwise, there is a change of direction. In fact, in recent years, the Ocean Park has been developing high-end tourism products on an individual basis so that visitors spend more time in the park with greater spending. The other direction is that we need to bolster the strengths of the Ocean Park, and we also need to rethink on changing the weakest links. Now, regarding the question on land, we do not have a mechanism for Ocean Park to sell its land. And also for the two hotels, only 1.75% of revenue goes to the Ocean Park. The rest goes to the government. So revenue from sale of land or hotel at the moment do not constitute a major source of income. Now, should there be any major change in the future, say if there is any legislative changes, we may give it a thought. I'll defer to the Ocean Park to answer your question on conservation. With the two giant pandas successfully mated for the first time in many years. After mating, however, our team has been observing the development very closely. Signs of pregnancy will not emerge until June. We will check the panda's appetite and the hormonal profile. So no good news yet. Another question, of course, land is freely given to the government, by the government to the Ocean Park. But what if the operation of the Ocean Park is scaled back in the future so that we focus on education and conservation? Then the government may be able to repossess some of the areas. This will also be considered by the multidisciplinary team. We will conduct a rethink exercise and chart the way forward. Next, Mr. Elvin Yang, 5 minutes. The administration suggests that we should foot the bill for the Ocean Park because we cannot stand to lose Ocean Park. It is very important. So we are putting Ocean Park on life support with public money. But I think it's hellish for the Ocean Park as well. Well, earlier, the suggested amount was $60 billion because of the epidemic. Of course, it was unacceptable. And then, through some bargaining exercise, we now see this amount. And you say a team will be set up to do a physical check-up and do a rethink exercise. Should we spend so much money on consultancy? Because the problem, as we now see it, is that the ocean park is departing from its original objective, is totally out of step with Hong Kong people. Although I see you're trying very hard to look after animals for Ying Ying Lok Lok. Well, are we going to give out a licensing packet of $5.4 billion for the successful mating? The government should not interfere with the private market. And it is impossible for the government to be in a better position to run a theme park than the private operator. But your suggestion is that we should set up a team steered by the government with $5.4 billion, and then you will engage consultants to find a way out. So what have you been doing over the past few years? You've been incurring losses for a few years. What has the government done? And since the Secretary is here, I'd like to ask you this question. Your former boss, C.Y. Leung, the deputy chair of the NPC, is asking the government not to fund the ocean park. So what's your take on that? I'd like to know the government's official stance, despite your lobbying effort. Or would you rather let a private operator with the necessary knowledge to run the theme park, running the theme park to operate the park itself? Because I really don't see how this team set up by the government will fare better than a private operator in running a theme park. Well, I'll answer the question on C.Y. Leung, but I'll defer to the ocean park to take the other question first. Just 4 or 5 years ago, the ocean park had an emission of 7 million, and then it tapered to some 5 or 6 million visitors. So we have had a large client base. In 2018-19, 2.6 million Hong Kong people visited the ocean park. So this park is supported by Hong Kong people. Regarding its operation, we had more operational income than expenditure. In other words, over the past few years, for EBITDA, we had over $300 million of income. At the same time, we are heavily indebted. We have loans to pay off, leading to operational difficulties. The most important reason is that since the end of January, we have had the epidemic outbreak. Over the past few months, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars cash outflow without income, without emission. At the same time, we still have to look after animals and pay our staff and maintain our machine and equipment. We do not have recurrent funding. So we're under a lot of pressure. Secretary, you still have time. There are divergent views on the ocean park. We do take a pragmatic approach in gauging these comments, regardless of who they are. It seems that the views are quite polarized. Some believe that the challenges are unsurmountable and that the operations should cease. At the same time, there are views that the operation should continue. So we do keep an open mind. Meanwhile, the government and the ocean park have collected a lot of views. So are you suggesting that we should just ignore C.Y. Leung, Secretary? I think I gave a clear answer. Mr. Ted Hui. The ocean park is a collective memory of many Hong Kong people. The ocean park represents our childhood, but does it justify the further injection of $5.4 billion? We must always bear in mind public finance. We must always bear in mind how the government has squandered away public money. We have huge cost overruns, and we footed the bill for Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge, the XRL, even the Disneyland. It was totally unreasonable for the public to foot the bill. So, Edward Yao, how do you salvage the confidence of the public in the government? Do we still have confidence in the management of the ocean park? How can we still be confident in the government to make sure that the government will monitor the use of public money? Why should we pay first and then wait for a reform, a rebirth of the ocean park? Edward Yao, how can you ask the public to be confident in you in terms of the value of the ocean park? I think some are quantifiable, some are not. In terms of its sentimental value, it is not quantifiable. The ocean park has established its brand for decades, and it's also popular. Now, every year, on an annual basis, the ocean park brings in $7.6 billion of economic benefits, including tourism and spending. It provides 2,000 permanent jobs and 2,000 temporary jobs. Every year, in terms of admission, over 40% of them are Hong Kong people. $2.6 million in our population, in other words, and 640,000 visitors enjoy various concessions. These are all direct or indirect benefits brought to Hong Kong. About the management's responsibility, it is not just a private corporation. It is not money-minded. It bears the responsibility as set out in the ordinance. At the same time, the government also shoulders certain responsibility because the government sets out the legislative framework. And the government is also responsible for charting the way forward for the future development of the ocean park, say in terms of legislative limitations and also monitoring. We need to work it out with the ocean park. So you're asking for money to help sustain the operation of the park for 1 year, and then you will review the legislative framework to remove obstacles and to rethink its operation. But is it fair to pump so much public money in it and see what happens? Because if you don't succeed, it would be a waste of public money. Is it fair? Or would you rather conduct a review, a rethink first, and remove obstacles and proceed with legislative amendments before you ask for funding? In fact, this is not our starting point. I recall about a year and a half ago in the previous budget, we also referred to making changes to the education and conservation function of the ocean park. And about the strategic repositioning plan, we also advocate the leveraging of the innate advantages of the ocean park. The government has started this work. Since the onset of the epidemic in end January, there's been a drastic drop in visitor arrivals. This is one of the unforeseen circumstances. This should be considered in our rethink exercise. In the coming 2 years, we don't envisage the tourist figures to go up again. Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Today I received letters from a number of unions. Workers in Ocean Park have reflected their concerns to the unions. At the moment, they are very worried. If the operation of the park ceases, definitely their jobs will be affected and their families will be affected. I've read the annual report of the park, and in fact, in the past, the park actually performed quite well. Not until in recent years has it started to incur a deficit. And at the moment, workers are bearing the brunt, and it is not reasonable. We must therefore make sure that the jobs can be kept. We need to approve funding to save the jobs. Secretary, I understand that the funding available could only sustain the operation of the park for 1 year. And according to paragraph 20 of the paper, I see that you've asked the OPC to contain costs by, for example, ceasing the acquisition of new animals and suspending new capital projects, reducing the budget for sales and marketing, suspending some of the attractions. You also mentioned that it will strive to maintain the headcount for the operation whilst scaling back the operation. So I'm concerned whether there will be a pay cut for staff of the Ocean Park. At the same time, I understand that $20 million will be spent on setting up this review unit, or rather the team. You need to pay for a dozen staff of the review unit, and also you need to pay the consultant as well. The Ocean Park Review Unit will help the Ocean Park chart the way forward. Now, I'd like to know when you will have the review outcome, because you're spending over $20 million on it. How do you make sure that next year Ocean Park will still sustain its operation? What about the board of directors or the management of the Ocean Park? If funding is approved this time, what role will they play in ensuring the sustainable operation of the park? In the current proposal to tide the Ocean Park over, we want to keep the operation of the park. We also want to keep the 2,000 jobs it creates. This is an important aspect in our proposal. Under the current epidemic, the government's policy direction is to keep jobs, and this is no exception. Now, as far as the management is concerned, I understand that they've also made adjustments, and they've also received a pay cut. Since the end of January, some operations have been suspended. At the same time, they continue to look after animals and carry on with other tasks. The review should be completed in 6 months. This is a rather tight time frame. We laid down certain principles in the previous plan, but we may need to be bolder this time. For example, apart from facilities inside the park, we need to tap other opportunities and see whether the park can expand its operation to outside this area. At the same time, there may be limitations, and they may not be giving full play to its innate advantages. And that is why we need professionals on our team. But I do agree with Mr. Poon that we need to keep jobs. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang, 5 minutes. Oh, Mr. Yu Si-wing first. He's back. Yes, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Your turn first. Thank you, Chairman. I think we need to consider the ocean park in a number of aspects. First, on its contribution over the past 40 years. It's a collective memory. It has also brought a lot of joy to Hong Kong people. That's also made a lot of contributions to our tourism industry. I think I asked the Secretary this question. Over the years, the ocean park has brought in $12 billion of direct and indirect economic benefits. It also carries an educational value. And it also looks after the underprivileged. Over 600,000 visitors enjoy a concessionary admission prize as they visit the ocean park and have knowledge on conservation.
If it goes bust, there are problems. The SAR government cannot just brush it aside because it should shoulder the responsibility for the 2,000 staff. Would they be unemployed? And also there are over 7,000 animals in the park. Well, you can ignore the bank, some would say, but I think in Hong Kong you shouldn't adopt such an attitude. You have borrowed money, you should repay. You can't say that if you don't have the money, you don't need to pay back the bank. Well, I don't think that we should just give the Ocean Park $5.4 billion and then Ocean Park is allowed not to repay the bank. This is a matter of responsibility. And what if we lose the Ocean Park? Well, then we will be losing an education and conservation base, and this is a very good destination for our people, and also for our competitiveness in the region. We will be losing some of it because in the past we had both the Ocean Park and the Disneyland, but we will be losing the Ocean Park. So how do we attract tourists from all over the world? So I think we should give consideration to all these as to what will happen in the future. Last time you came to ask us for $10.6 billion to expand the ocean park. This is not realistic anymore. We are now talking about salvaging the park. So I don't think we should be talking about expanding the park. So what is the way forward for Ocean Park? I think we should highlight its function in terms of conservation and providing recreation for Hong Kong people. The Ocean Park itself may not only be a tourist attraction, it should also shoulder some social responsibilities. It's just like the Victoria Park. It may attract visitors, tourists. It carries certain commercial value, but when it comes to the modus operandi, it shouldn't just try to attract visitors with its animals. It should make use of its mountains and sea views. And also, it should highlight its differences from our neighboring theme parks so that it can have more vitality and competitive edge. The government is going to set up an Ocean Park review unit. I think a more detailed study should be carried out. Conservation, recreation, and commercial values should not be separated. Now the government is going to set up a review unit. Do you have a direction? Can you achieve what I said just now? How can we help both the people, the tourism industry, and the economy? Well, Mr. Yu asked several questions. Lately, I've talked to Mr. Yu and his sector. Well, for education and conservation, I've talked to different stakeholders. They all agree to these directions, and these are the innate advantages of the park. They should be developed further, but this may not make money. Now, for education, maybe some people will think that we shouldn't charge the students entrance fees. And for tourism, the ocean park should also reposition, because after the epidemic, a lot of things may change. I agree with Mr. Yu. These are the things we should look at in the review unit. Mr. Lau Yip-Kang. Ocean parks attendance has been dropping since 2015. And last year, because of the social unrest, and this year, because of the epidemic, now the ocean park is in financial dire straits. It has over 2,000 staff and over 7,000 animals, and they may lose a place to work and live. And the ocean park is our collective memory. If it closes down, I think a lot of people don't want to see that. Now, it's a homegrown local brand. In the past 43 years, the ocean park has been a very important tourist attraction. And in 2012, it also received a major international award as a tourist attraction. So it has made a lot of contribution to Hong Kong. It has done a lot in terms of education and conservation. We can just look at it from the financial perspective. But now it is facing a lot of problems. And the government is suggesting to inject $5.4 billion into Ocean Park so that it can continue to operate for one more year. Now, I and a lot of people are worried that this will become a bottomless pit. We are worried that after 12 months, we would have to salvage the Ocean Park again, and we will have to debate again in this conference room. Some members say that if there are new directions in the future, then the directions should be like this. For example, there should be synergy with our theme parks in the neighboring areas. I support Mr. Yu Siwing's proposal. We hope that the Ocean Park can embark on a new road so that it can remain a good destination for Hong Kong people. I would like to ask the park management, in the past few years, what measures have you adopted in order to improve the operation of the park? Mr. Lau Ming-wai. In the past few years, tourism industry has changed structurally. Well, previously, we asked for a funding of $10.6 billion. We spent 2 years on preparing that proposal. We have been trying our best to adjust to the changes in the market. We have looked at tourists from different areas, and we have also tried to attract more Hong Kongers to enter the park. We have also tried to make improvements to our restaurants and facilities. So in the past few years, the management has done various things so as to cope with the latest situation in the market. Unfortunately, in the past 12 months, there were social unrest and an epidemic. They dealt a huge blow to the park and the tourism industry. So in the past years, have you been repaying debt? In 2005 and 2013, we borrowed loans for 2 times. We've been repaying capital and interest. And That adds up to $3 billion. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. The Ocean Park has been operating for 40 plus years. It is a park for Hong Kong people. However, in recent years, most of the visitors come from the mainland. Well, the so-called social unrest, I don't think it's a social unrest. I think it's a black movement or villain movement. And the movement scared the tourists away. Why doesn't the government's relief fund 2.0 gave you some money? Well, you are going to set up a review unit. This unit is to save the ocean park, but we don't know whether it will be successful because there are no plans now. The ocean park has repaid loans of $3 billion, but I don't see the details of your loans. Now, if you have to repay a loan of $3 billion and you just have $2 billion left, how can you operate for one more year? Are you going to repay your debts in one go? This worries me further because we don't know when the epidemic will be over. We are not sure. So in the latter half of the year, maybe you still have 0 visitors. Then you will just be spending money. If we give you $5.4 billion, can you really stay afloat? If you don't repay your loan, maybe you can survive. But if you repay your loan, you may not be able to stay afloat. Now we have this so-called rescue program. Supposedly, you will have to come back for more funding after this. I don't know how much more money you want from us. How are we going to save the ocean park? This is a big question mark. Nobody can answer that question. So for this sum of $5.4 billion, if you can show us clearly what the future is like, and can you tell us that you will definitely be successful? Even if you come back for more funding, it won't be a huge amount. Then it's easier for us to decide. But there are so many unknowns now, Secretary. If we support you, well, just now I received a phone call. It's from one of Hong Kong's citizens. He sounds like a young person. He asked us not to support this proposal because we don't know how much more we have to pay before the ocean park becomes a Hong Kong People's Park again. Now, I would like to ask you this. If the ocean park is to be changed into a park which only accommodates or which only relies on Hong Kong visitors, will it be able to survive? Well, we can look at the attendance of the ocean park. In the past years, yes, it's a place loved by tourists and Hong Kong people. For example, in the past 10 years, at the peak, the annual attendance was 7 million. And at the lowest point, of course, it's not about this period. At the lowest point, it's 5.8 million people. And Hong Kong people accounted for 2 to 2.6 million. So this has been quite stable. No matter how many tourists come, Hong Kong people will still visit the park. And if the other 50% or so is 0, of course, it will be very worrying. I don't want to mislead you. Well, this is a Hong Kong People's Park, but doesn't mean that only Hong Kong people can visit it. So how can we have a better mix of visitors? Well, I want you to think about this. I want to talk about the red leaf garden at Tai Tong. A lot of Hong Kong people and even visitors would like to go there. How come the Ocean Park cannot do that? I think Hong Kong can have its own parks where Hong Kong people would like to visit. So can the Ocean Park become such a park? Secretary? Well, in the earlier plan, we also attach a lot of importance to this. And also, we attach a lot of importance to conservation and education, and these are about Hong Kong people. So this is not contradictory to what Mr. Leung says. And Hong Kong Park is benefiting from the relief packages of the government. Well, for the funds for protecting jobs, the staff will benefit, and also restaurants will also in the park will also get subsidies. Now you are asking for 5.4 billion, and 3 billion will be used for repaying the loan, and 2.4 billion will be for 1 year's operation. Can you break it down? $2.4 billion, how much of it is for taking care of the animals? Can we break up the funding and vote separately? I think the Ocean Park has been squandering money. It knows that financially it's in a poor position. On the other hand, I know that in July you will have a new exhibition hall, which is called MEERKT, meerkat. You will be exhibiting meerkats. They are from South Africa. It looks like cat or panda. But you are now still buying new animals. I want to know how many of this how many animals of this kind have you bought, and you have built a new exhibition hall for them. You are the Ocean Park. Why are you acquiring meerkats? Ocean Park. Well, for meerkats, they will be put in our children's area. Other than meerkats, we also have a turtle called elephant turtle. They both play a very important role in education. They can send out very clear conservation messages. So animals themselves don't cost a lot. We sometimes would exchange animals with other places. As for the elephant turtle, it was confiscated by the government and is placed in the Ocean Park. We think that by exhibiting such animals, children and visitors would know more about them. For the meerkats, you don't have to spend money on buying them. You just exchange your animals with them. Yes, generally we do that. And how about the exhibition hall? It's a new one. How much money did you spend on it? $60 million. $60 million just for meerkats? And what? Elephant turtle? You spent $60 million on a new building? You don't even have money to take the MT out, and you want to buy a Maserati? This is unimaginable. You should be exhibiting marine animals. And why suddenly you want to exhibit meerkats? Answer my second question. And for that $2.4 billion. How much of it will be spent on animals? Mr. Lau, for our exhibits, we didn't make a decision in the past few months to exhibit them. So for new facilities and new animals, well, decisions concerning them were made several years ago. So we didn't squander money in times of adversity. In the paper, you can see a breakdown of our budget. $1.1 billion will be spent on operation, and it's 1/3 less than our general expenses. We know we need to cut costs. We will not cut our resources for animals. $300 million will be spent on animals and education this year.
As for the $300 million for animals, the penguins, dolphins, butterflies, are you saying that the $300 million covers the care for all those animals? And does the money also cover the salaries for the people who care for the animal? Yes. Mr. Lau Mingwei, could you? Yes, I can confirm that. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I've been listening in. I heard the Secretary saying that the walls of the ocean park come from developments in the past 2 years, pandemic, social incident. I asked for the financial statements of the ocean park, but then I got a reply saying the reports are on the internet. I'm not sure if the Secretary has read the reports. So there's something special about the operation of the ocean park. It has been in operation for many years. Before 2013, the operation of the ocean park had been mostly in line with the Ocean Park Operation Ordinance. Back then, the visitors every year was around 3 to 4 million visitors every year, mostly Hong Kong people. In most cases, we got surpluses in those years. It may not be a lot, but they could balance the books. But after 2003, there was a change. By 2005, there were new amusement rides, the repackaging initiatives in the ocean park. For the first few years, the interest expenses, depreciations were not reflected in the first few years. The percentage taken up by depreciation interest expense were reflected. So between 2003 and 2008, things were looking rosy. But following 2008, we start to see depreciation and financial burden becoming significant, weighing down on the ocean park. Despite that, before 2016, the ocean park was still operating at a surplus. It was following 2016 when the financial burden became obvious, the depreciation and even the visitor experience at the ocean park, things went south. Secretary, when you're looking at the problem with the ocean park, look at what happened to the ocean park when it was established several decades ago, and what happened over the past few decades, the change in the way the ocean park was operated and all the debts that were piling up. You should remember that you look at what the ocean park has been doing. You have not learned lessons. You have forgotten 2 lessons. First, in this paper, it stated, paragraph 12, is saying that because of the epidemic, we expect the way there may need to be fundamental changes in the way, a paradigm shift in the amusement park about the way the park is run. But you're saying that this paradigm shift is about you need a solution that's something Hong Kong people and visitors will welcome. It's supposed to be, the park is supposed to be something for Hong Kong people, but then you're taking into consideration the outside visitors. So now you're not really making progress. You're still looking at the direction where you need to put in money and new amusement rides, more investment, and more, and you are really doing something that will backfire eventually. You're saying that for the review you don't have a specific direction, but paragraph 14 it's clearly stated that you need to find something that visitors will welcome. By the new direction, are you saying that you need to turn it into a new tourist attraction, you put in a huge amount of capital, and in 5 to 7 years' time, the appeal vanishes and you put in new money? Is this what you're going to do? What brilliant ideas do you have to offer, Secretary? Mr. Wu mentioned that the park was established in 1977. The way it was run never changed. The park is meant for public education, recreation. But we're not limiting the Ocean Park to the enjoyment of Hong Kong people only. But obviously, Hong Kong people play a major part in enjoying the park. In several years, the number of visitors had a huge impact on the operation of the Ocean Park. So over the past 2 years, the Ocean Park adapted and made adjustments. Efforts were made to appeal to visitors who spend a lot of money instead of tour groups as a whole. As for the way forward, as for the rethink, we have to look at where our strength lies and what are the areas that require changes. Also something to think about. For the coming 2 years, there will be major shifts in the tourism sector across the globe. So these will have an impact on the positioning of the Ocean Park. Speakers not coming through. Can we switch on the microphone for Mr. Wu Ji-wai? Paragraph 14. I put this question to you. You're saying that you want to find a way forward, welcomed by the Hong Kong community and visitors. How can you find a way that visitors welcome? Over the past 2 years, we have this tourism policy. If you can check out the blueprints for our tourism industry. In promoting tourism, we emphasize the local experience. When people pick a place to visit, they want to choose places where even the locals take pleasure in visiting. That's why we value the kind of experience that locals enjoy. But we need everything to work together. So that's why we're doing all sorts of promotion at regional levels. I'm just asking you about the Ocean Park. You're saying Ocean Park. Please press the button again. Next, Mr. Ray Chen. The Ocean Park is asking for $5.4 billion as a bailout package. I've listened to the views from many members. I don't see this proposal being embraced with enthusiasm from many members. Mr. Michael Tim put it well. You give them $5.4 billion, you're not really helping them, salvaging them. You're just putting them on life support. As Ms. Claudia Mo also said, this is like a blackmail, emotional blackmail. You're saying that if we don't give you the funding, you will close down. How can you approach us for the money at such short notice? The government And Legislative Council, we just got the notice from you that if you do not have the money, you will close down. You need to give advance notice. You can't just come to tell us and saying that, hey, we're sinking next month. You can't do this. For the secretary, you may not have enough time for this. I hope you can work on a paper, set out all the scenarios. If you do not get the funding, what will happen? Does it mean the ocean park just closes down? And even if you do go ahead with closing down, you need money with closing down. Overseas in mainland China, you don't just shut your gates. You have to look after the animals. You still have to feed the animals and look for places to set for those animals. Have you given any thought to those? As some people put it, you just need a year's time to think about how to close down the bank. If that's the case, just come clean. Just come clean and admit that you don't want to close down immediately. You just need more time. And even though it's very likely that in the end you still have to go under, in the paper it stated that the ocean park is a park for the Hong Kong people. That might well have been the case. It was the case in the past. I used to like the park. Between the ocean park and Disneyland, Disneyland is from foreign countries. The ocean park is our own. We have an emotional attachment. But today we don't have that emotional attachment anymore. In the future, unlikely. Not because of mainland or overseas visitors. Amusement parks are something that locals and outsiders will visit. But for the ocean park, something happened last year, and that really lost our support. Halloween last year, back in the times of Alan Zeman, it was working well. Someone shouted, "Hong Kongers add oil," and that was banned. The show was cancelled. You just pissed off half of Hong Kong people. Just cut ties with half of Hong Kong. They just said, "Add oil, Hong Kong people." Even the dancers decided to boycott the ocean park. They decided not to come to your October show. Have you thought about that? Have you decided? Were you going to apologize to Hong Kong people? Otherwise, you'll never become the ocean park for Hong Kong people. Any response, Secretary? Chair, I believe Ray Chan was saying single incident undermined the relationship between the ocean park and Hong Kong people. But I believe people in Hong Kong will form their own views about this. The park is dealing with a variety of problems, but we believe the park still has a chance. As you can see over the past 2 years, it still has its advantages it can leverage. As things went south, why did it go south all of a sudden? In a paper submitted in January, the financial position of the park back then was good enough for the next maybe 12 months. The monthly revenue was somewhere around $100 million per month. But there may be adjustments. But the outgoing expenses, that's around $120 million. So for the halt over the past 3 months, there has been a drop in revenue. That's $300 to $400 million in revenue. But the $120 million in expenses, they have still been incurred. The expenses going towards looking after animals and stuff. With the loss of the revenue, $700, $800 million, that means the money the park has will be depleted. So, speaker's not using a mic. Speaker's not coming through. Secretary. Chair, maybe I just responded briefly. Mr. Charles Mock, 5 minutes. Chair, I see this proposal, a request for $5.4 billion. It's for Ocean Park to tide the park over its difficulties. I was expecting the park would lay out a plan to restore confidence in the park, but we're disappointed. It's like saying, hey, you guys have this emotional attachment to the park, so that's why you guys should just give the park the money. There are so many animals, there are staff members on the payroll, but there are many questions. The positioning of the park. Do you want to focus on the aquarium? Do you want to focus on marine animals, conservation, or is it to be a resort, or is it a bit of everything? As to implementation, how capable is the park capable of implementing it? And for the management, you're shifting the blame to the pandemic and social incidents, the downward trend. The fact that the park was going south wasn't something that just happened over the past few months. Is anyone supposed to be held accountable? If you still have the same team in your management, when the business is sinking, you come to us for the funding. You come to us like as if we were like an ATM machine for the money. It can't go on like this. In recent years, we see this a lot. I think the management of the ocean park, maybe officials, you have seen this a lot. Cyberport or Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, you have this pitching. A startup has a great plan and wants the investors to invest millions, tens of millions of dollars in the startup. They may have only 5 minutes for the pitching. They lay out a plan, they say what their strengths are, and then people will assess and decide whether to invest in a startup. But you can't even get that done properly at this point. Even if startups can give us something like a market analysis, at least they can tell us what they would do with the money, and what they would do if they can get the money, and what they would do if they cannot secure the money, or if they just can get only part of the money. You don't have anything like that over here. Chairman, this has happened all too often. The government gives us one proposal. Can you give us alternatives? Show us the pros and cons. You don't have it here. Financial analysis, it's not here. The safest option now is to give all the money to the bank. They are the safest option. You don't have any explanation. If you go to those pitching events, at least the startups pitching themselves, at least they're going to give you the reasons why you should support them. Over here for Ocean Park, poor performance over the past few years, and you're still asking us for the money. It makes no sense. Look at the chairman and the deputy chairman of the board. If it's your own money, are you going to put your money into a company like the Ocean Park? That's my question to you. If this is ever something like a pitching event, the information you're giving us is not a recipe for success. You're not going to get your investment, not even for $5 million, not to mention this $5.4 billion. Why do we people of Hong Kong have to foot the bill for you? All this talk about emotional attachment, a part of our growth, part of our childhood, but no one has addressed the point about the bottomless pit. It makes no sense. We could have put resources to much better use elsewhere in our community. Can you give us the details? Have you compiled statistics on, have you done anything like a poll on how many people in Hong Kong actually support the plan to ask for the money, on unconditionally saying, people are saying, if this is a bottomless pit, we're going to cut losses. Don't be stupid. Can you address the questions? If you're pitching, you have to convince the investors you should invest in the company. Secretary. Chair, I was addressing the questions raised by another member. I actually responded to this point. As I said, for this particular organization, the government looks at the revenue, sources of visitors, and the contribution made by an organization to the society, recreation, education, job opportunities. These are things to be taken into account. At this point, it's a difficult time for the ocean park and maybe repositioning. I hope I can address those in a bit. Can we switch on the mic for Charles Mark? We have had the experience with that analysis about the economic benefits, about, say, the high-speed railway. You talked about the social benefits. It's all talk. It's all hot air. Just think about this. If this were your own money, would you invest in a project like this? As for the chairman of the board and deputy chairman of the board, Mr. Kwok Wai-Kang.
有幾樣嘢
Thank you, Chairman. I think we need to set the record straight. First, $5.4 billion. This is for parting with the ocean park, not reuniting it with it. We may need another $10 billion for that. And it's always difficult to break up with someone. And like other members said just now, if we maintain status quo and keep the ocean park as it is, it will be a bottomless pit. According to some online comments, the government footed the bill for the construction of the Disneyland, $13.6 billion, followed by several billion dollars. There were a number of funding injections. For the ocean park, however, there is no funding injection. It comes in the form of a loan. The ocean park has been self-sustaining for years. Now it's on the brink of collapse. Previously, because of the redevelopment plan, the ocean park took out a huge loan, far beyond its affordability of repayment. And my fellow member also mentioned the concern about jobs. We believe the breakup fee is too hefty. We need to make a bargain. Especially $3 billion will go back to the creditor. Can you have further negotiations with the creditor? Can you just repay interest first and have a principal moratorium? Because frankly, it is not money well spent if you pay the principal for the coming year. And about the 2,000 staff members, if you lay them off instantly, they do not get any compensation. They do not get any protection under the protection of wages against the insolvency fund. Is that true? And also, does this money cover severance payment for the staff members? Next point on animals. How will you deal with them? You have 7,500 animals, is that right? How will they be handled? Will you drive them up a mountain? Or will they be sent off to other theme parks? What will be the arrangement? In future, if you only keep the education and conservation element, well, it's just like the botanical and zoological park at mid-levels. Just make it free for everybody. So 2 questions. Chairman, the ocean park can answer questions number 1 and 3. About the loan and animals, and I will answer the question on employees. Yes, Deputy Chair. About the payment of loans in the coming 12 months, we need to pay the interest as well as the principal. In the past few months, our park have been closed because of the epidemic, and we have been negotiating and discussing with our creditors about the repayment option. It is already the last resort. We've run out of options, and that is why we're here to apply for funding. And if funding is approved, we will continue to negotiate and bargain for better repayment conditions. And in the case of closure, how will we handle the animals? Well, the scenario we'd like to avoid, of course, is liquidation. Be it suppliers, employees' wages. If we're unable to repay the debt to the banks, etc., we might go into liquidation. And by then, nobody has the control, not even the chief executive, the CEO, the secretary, or chairman. Only the creditors have the control. And that is why if we want to truly break up with the ocean park, we should at least avoid the winding up of the park. Even if we want to go through the winding up procedure, if we want to cease the operation, we should at least figure out a proper plan for the animals. Otherwise, if we go into liquidation, it will be very chaotic for our animals. Another simple question. Secretary, you'd like to answer? The other two questions, let me respond to the point about employees. I want to emphasize that we don't want to see the park going into liquidation. $3.1 billion out of the $5.4 billion funding proposal will be used to repay loans to avoid the park being wound up. And I share the same concern. Say for an ordinary company, I'm sorry, Chairman, I really don't want to waste any more time. In short, let's say if we approve $5.4 billion, then 1 year on, if you lay off staff, if you close the park, will they get severance payment? Now, if we go into liquidation, it will be up to the court to decide in accordance with the law whether the employees should be given any priority over creditors. The Ocean Park Corporation is a statutory body, not a business corporation. And as such, employees may not get the protection offered under the protection of wages against insolvency fund. Mr. Kenneth Lau. From a financial perspective, I consulted professional accountants on my Facebook. 70% of accountants agreed that there should be no more money for the ocean park. In fact, 30% of accountants agreed that everybody in the management should be fired. But that is a discussion on social media now. About 6 months ago, I was given this information about this proposal of some $10 billion for the ocean park. I think the major management problem is overborrowing and a lack of a clear positioning and mismanagement. For ocean-themed parks around the world, say the one in Orlando, it has only an annual attendance of some 4 million. And also the other SeaWorld, 3.75 million attendance. But there is no problem with the operation of these parks. I think the problem here lies with capital investments in the past few years. The philosophy then was to base your investment on tourist preferences. You set your long-term development goals based on this, and hence you departed from your original intention. You're supposed to provide recreation, education, and conservation. So once you depart from this original objective, there is no way you can compare with Chimelong or Universal Studio. You do not have the necessary infrastructure to compare and compete with them. You don't have Marvel superheroes. You do not have the various attractions in Universal Studio to support you. if you depart from your objective, there is no need to sustain this operation. If you say 4 million attendants could really sustain the operation of SeaWorld. In fact, in Sentosa, Singapore, it also has an aquarium. It's rather small, but it's sustainable. I don't need you to answer my questions anymore. I've read the papers. Well, whether to complete or to seal a deal or not is really up to the big boss. It's rather outdated. Well, I think we should have an aquarium instead of amusement rides. I don't know about the appreciation costs, maintenance costs, etc. Yes, the roller coaster is really exciting. It's such a thrill. But then I get bored. Every 5 years, I need a new ride. So it's a bottomless pit if you invest along these directions. In your last year's presentation, you say the major competitors are the Beijing resort area and also Disneyland in Shanghai. And the Singapore Zoo is also one of your competitors. In fact, Singapore's Bird Park is also your competitor, and also the Gone by the Bay is also your competitor. For these facilities, they don't need to renew their physical infrastructure. It's not a lot of investment. Anyway, I shouldn't be giving you advice. As a professional, I'm just doing my best. For the ocean-themed attractions, apart from ocean ecology, there are also other things you should pay attention to. For example, how oceanic resources and the relationship between humans, the interactions, how we have been exploiting these resources. But you have never explored these themes. Apart from having fish tanks, all you have are rides. And also, what's the relationship between ocean ecology and climate change? You haven't even thought about it. All you want is to have group tours and then amusement rides. They get bored 2 or 3 years down the road. You don't need to respond. No response? No response? Thank you. Mr. Horace Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. This is the follow-on proposal after the $11 billion proposal floated by the government last time. So in fact, it's not a full stop. It's just a comma. Because after that, you talked about grand plans in terms of financial information and future development plans in your last proposal. Because of social changes, these are not deemed feasible anymore. The ocean park used to rely on visitors under the IVS, and under this presumption, the ocean park continues to expand. But in the near future, this probably won't happen again. So it's time to put a stop to it. And that's what this government proposal entails. I don't think the old way of the ocean park is sustainable. And I find it regrettable. But I've done my homework and I have considered very carefully this proposal. I also have some attachment to the ocean park. When I was in kindergarten, in fact, I also went to the ocean park. I was the one standing in the middle. So definitely, it's collective memory for me as well. As a member here, however, I must say that I do not support the last proposal. For this one, that will put things to a stop. I think I for one will give my support. But Secretary, you must work harder over the weekend. Some $30 billion out of the $5.4 billion will be spent to repay loans. I mean, ultimately, you need to repay this loan. There is no way you can write this off. There is no way for the government to be a bad debtor and try to shun its responsibility. It also affects the government's reputation. Will lenders be willing to make loans for statutory bodies or even the government in the future if it is not passed? I know there is a question on whether we should approve funding today or whether there should be 2 installments. You can come back and apply for further funding in order to address concerns in the community. So, Secretary, you do need to tell us whether you can do that or not. And I hope that in half a year or in a year's time, you can tell us how it will be overhauled. Say, after funding is approved, please tell me that the dedicated team will come up with a new proposal to change its direction. I will be giving you my suggestions as well. You can keep certain elements, say the cable car, and for the amusement rides, if we do away with them, can we keep it as a park favored by Hong Kong people as well as visitors? Because if I go to Japan, if I go to Australia with my daughters, I usually go to public parks. Admission is free, usually. They come with very long slides and other recreational facilities. My daughters really enjoy them. What about the restaurant in Ocean Park? Can we have fine dining there? It has such nice view. And about the water park, can we allow another operator to run it, to become the back garden of Hong Kong people? I hope you come up with some plan so that you can give us hope, so that we can keep this attraction in Hong Kong. I don't really think this is the responsibility of the management. I don't think that they should take all the blame. Usually it's an insidious problem. Please switch on his mic. All right, I think that's all for me, Chairman. Next, Dr. Helena Wong. Chairman, I've read the paper. I've also heard the debate. The government is asking for $5.4 billion together with supplementary provision of $13.23 million to chart the way forward for Ocean Park's rebirth. It's really puzzling. The government is, in other words, saying that the Ocean Park will close down if we don't approve funding. But my take is, so what? So what if you close down? Don't blame it on the epidemic. The epidemic affects everyone. But it's been a while since the Ocean Park has incurred losses. Secretary, I really don't know what you have been doing. And also $13.23 million to chart the way forward for Ocean Park's rebirth. We don't know what the future lies ahead for Ocean Park, and you ask the ElectCo to approve funding now. And according to the paper, since 2018, you have initiated a study, a rethink exercise for repositioning the Ocean Park. So back in 2008, you already proposed more amusement rides for Ocean Park. If that is the repositioning study commenced in 2018, why do you need $13.23 million more for another study? After a spate of studies, perhaps you still can't win the support of Hong Kong people. Perhaps the positioning still remains vague. So what exactly are you doing? The question is whether the positioning of Ocean Park is right and whether there is anything wrong with the commercial operation of Ocean Park. I mean, has the secretary been sleeping all along? Because very soon you'll come back for another funding proposal. It's really not palatable. The money will go to the repayment of loans. So, Secretary, please tell me about the 2018 study. Has it been completed? Why are you asking for $13 million more? I need to set the record straight, first of all. To address Dr. Helena Wong's concern, we are not coercing members. As we mentioned, it was in financial dire straits in January. From January till now, the Ocean Park has been forced to close its operation, and as I mentioned in the previous answer, it causes a cash flow problem for it.
And for looking forward, we need to reposition. In the past 2 years, I've been discussing with the Ocean Park about this. But for its operation, its EBITDA was positive. However, as some members pointed out, its loan has brought about pressure on it in terms of interest. So even though its EBITDA is positive, it cannot develop healthily. And some members also said that the priorities would have to be set better by the Ocean Park. Many people think that the Ocean Park has its unique advantages. Those have to be kept. The government would support that. In the future, we may need some changes. How do we attract visitors who can generate income for the park? Now, for amusement rides, in the long term, they may not be able to maintain the attractiveness. However, for educational and conservation areas, maybe they can attract more people. But can they generate enough income for the park to operate? We have to think about all this. The Ocean Park cannot raise funds. It cannot try to make money from its land. And other than borrowing money, it cannot finance through other means. So I think we have to reconsider all that. Our last member, because we will wrap up at 7. Mr. Fernando Zhang. Just now, the Secretary said that in January, you were applying for a funding of $10.6 billion. You already told us at that time that the operation of the Ocean Park was not that good. You said that you've told us early. I don't agree with you. You came to apply for $10.6 billion because you had a grand plan. You are going to build 7 thematic areas, and you will launch a new strategic repositioning plan. So this is a huge plan. And after a few months, you come to apply for half of the sum, $5.4 billion. It's just for you to stay afloat. So these are 2 totally different issues. So after 3 months of epidemic, your grand plan would become a survival plan. Today is the 15th of May, and you send out this paper. You say that if we don't give you the money, the ocean park would go bankrupt in June. Have you heard about this before? That is, the management would tell the board of directors, we will go bankrupt next month. Why don't you each inject a huge amount of money into the company? Do companies operate in this way? Who should shoulder the responsibility for this? Is it the Ocean Parks Board or the secretary? Why would you come to tell us so late? That is, if we don't approve the funding, the ocean park will go bust next month. On the paper dated 20th of January, from paragraph 3 to paragraph 6 and 7, well, the caption stated very clearly that is, operation and attendance are facing huge challenges. It has depicted what happened in the past year and the recent few months. So in terms of operation, it already encountered problems. And in paragraph 6, it says that if we cannot get other extra incomes, then we will use up all the money by the end of this year. So we stated this very clearly in January. In January, we didn't just ask the FC for money so that the park can continue to operate. We also want the park will be able to make investments so that it can generate income, and that would allow the park to stay self-sufficient. So what has changed? Well, because on that day, we didn't expect that from the 26th of January up to now, the ocean park would have to suspend its operation. Yes, I heard you. So that's where the problem lies. Now, if you read paragraph 6 of the last paper, you would see that the money would originally last the park until the end of this year, but now this happened 6 months earlier. I have to clarify this. Otherwise, I am afraid that members might be misled into thinking that there are other rooms for maneuver. So who's responsible for this? I don't think can answer the question. Well, you just tell us at the last minute. This is also a fact. Now, even if we give you $5.4 billion and then you repay the loans of $3 billion, then how much money are you still owing other people? I think the other loan is the government loan. It's $5 billion. So the interest each year would exceed $1 billion. If members read our paper, you will see that we hope the FC to allow us to do this. That is providing interest waivers for the 2 government loans until July this year. How about the interest? The interest counting hasn't started yet. How much money is that? $5.1 billion, including principal and interest. So item 4, $5.1 billion. We hope that the first stage of returning the interest or repaying would be postponed. But that has a financial implication, right? So that's why the postponement. What's the cost? How much less interest will be collected by the government? We haven't collected less interest because it hasn't started to pay interest. But they have to repay $5 billion. The $3 billion is commercial loan. You're talking about the government loan. So you get a $5.4 billion from us, you will repay the bank. Well, originally the park would have to repay the government within this year. We hope that with the approval of the FC, the repayment can start next September. That involves a cost because the interest will be waived. No, we haven't waived the interest. They just start paying later. They will still have to pay the interest. So originally they have to pay, but they don't have to pay now. So within this year, we will be getting less. Within the coming year, we will be collecting less interest, right? That's not money. Let me clarify. Oh, for the government loan, the original repayment date is September next year. But the original terms are like this. Well, some of them may not be too clear. That is, after paying the commercial loan, then the park should repay the government loan. We want to repay the commercial loan earlier, so we want to make clear in this paper that the government loans will start to collect the repayment in September next year, and that's about $5.4 billion. So the date will be set in September 2021, but that doesn't involve any income foregone because during this period, interest would still have to be charged. Okay, time is up. The meeting is adjourned.